Hi, my name is Trina. Welcome back to my channel. We are currently a couple of days into December, so it's time to do our December reset and November wrap up. I did want to start off this video by saying to my devoted, wonderful returning viewers, sorry for being so weird with my upload schedule this fall. I realize I really was trying to keep to a weekly schedule and was just failing abysmally at it, especially these last few weeks, which just makes me really sad because reading and talking about books is my absolute favorite hobby. It's just the best way that I like to spend my free time, so it really sucks when I don't have enough free time to devote to the hobbies that I want to devote to, and I really appreciate everyone who continues to comment and be supportive even when I'm super slow to respond or be on YouTube because of my own personal life. I still really appreciate it. But yeah, for the last few months, I've just had to prioritize traveling and being with my family, things like that, over editing, which just takes a lot of time and I just haven't had time for it. So I've had to skip a couple of weeks of videos or put some videos on like hold that I'll get to hopefully in the next few months. But I really appreciate your patience. We will be back to semi-regular programming relatively soon as my life gets less busy. And thank you so much to all the sweetie pies who keep commenting and encouraging stuff on my videos. That more than anything makes me want to come back and make more videos and makes me really miss YouTube when I don't have time for it. So I really appreciate you guys again. But with that, like I said, it's the beginning of December, so I need to do a reset. I need a reset right now, badly. I slowed down so much my reading of November, but it was all predicted, like it wasn't a surprise, but it still sucks to not read that much. So I'm really excited to get into December when I should hopefully have a little bit more time for reading. But we do have some books to talk about to wrap up November 1st, so as always, I want to start with my November wrap up. I read 9 books in November, which may seem like a lot, but several of them were graphic novels, very short. It wasn't like I was reading them for stats padding, it's just when I didn't have a lot of time, but I still craved reading, I was like, you know what would be perfect? A graphic novel. So I picked up a couple more this month of that, which definitely has lightened my load, and I won't talk about those books for too long because there's not a ton to say about them. But I did start off my month with 2 heavy hitters. I read Ninth House and Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo to start off my November. I read Hellbent for my fall reading vlog that I'll link or whatever if you want to go see more detailed reactions to that. And Ninth House I actually read last year for a vlog, and then I was rereading it in the beginning of this month because I started Hellbent and realized I had no idea what had happened in Hellbent, so I needed to reread Ninth House. I really loved Ninth House the first time I read it, and I really loved it the second time. It held up, which I'm so happy about. Ninth House and Hellbent, the Alex Stern series, about like magical clubs on Yale's campus, on like at the college campus of Yale. They have like an underground society of magicians, and there's an organization called Leigh that is responsible for monitoring the behavior of those magic societies and making sure that they are not doing anything too illegal, basically. And our main character, Alex Stern, in this series is recruited to Yale solely because of her very special magical abilities that are revealed to us throughout the book. And she's being mentored by Darlington, who is a part of Leigh, the society, and they build up a rapport over the course of the novel. But we're told very early on in the book that something has happened to Darlington in the future timeline that we need to now fix. So simultaneously, we are learning in one timeline what happened to Darlington, and in the future what Alex is doing about what happened to Darlington. So with all that, Ninth House, really loved it on the reread. I gave it 4.5 stars on the reread as well. I think in my first read, what held it back from a 5-star was the same thing that held it back on the second read. Ninth House kind of feels incomplete on its own. Reading it together with Hellbent really felt perfect because Ninth House doesn't really resolve the conflicts that it sets out in the beginning. It kind of invents some new conflicts and resolves those, but the core conflict of the novel is just carried through to the next book, so it doesn't really stand alone as its own story. You really need to read Hellbent to get any sort of like major emotional resolutions a lot for the core of the story. So because of that, I feel like it doesn't like sit as a perfect 5-star, even though I really love it, just because it doesn't stand on its own either the first or the second time I read it. But it definitely helped the second time jumping straight into Hellbent right afterwards. For Hellbent, pretty much picks off just where Ninth House left off. In the beginning, it tries to do a similar sort of dual timeline to Ninth House, but that stops around the 150-page mark, and we're pretty much just in one timeline for the majority of Hellbent. And I also really liked Hellbent. I also gave Hellbent 4.5 stars. Trying to remember now why it wasn't a perfect 5-star. Sometimes you just know, you know, like it feels like a 5-star, it feels like a new favorite book. This series overall might end up being like a 5-star series to me, like a new favorite series, but it does feel very series-like in terms of every book kind of leaves off on a cliffhanger, like a big final note that makes me feel unsatisfied, unresolved. I'm like, I need more from this story, which is good in some respects because I'm like, I'm definitely going to read the 3rd book in this series when it comes out next year, but also bad in other respects in terms of like, it's not a perfect 5-star on its own. And it was a perfect time of year to read it. I really love reading these books in the fall because, especially in Hellbent, you get even more supernatural elements to it. And also fall always really does remind me of university and being at college, especially with these like clubs at Yale are similar to like the clubs we had on my college campus because they didn't really have sororities or fraternities on my college campus either. They had these like elitism clubs, and seeing those critiqued and the ways that Leigh Bardugo critiques them, I just think is really, really well done. In general, I just love this series. I'm so excited for book 3 coming out next year. But after that, the rest of my month was pretty slow. There were no other books that were as long as Hellbent or Ninth House. Starting off, I picked up a graphic novel that I was really excited to read, Genderqueer, a memoir by Maia Kobabe. Again, this is another book that I have a physical copy of. I promise I'm making progress with my physical TBR. I just didn't bring it with me home for the holidays. But I really, really liked the physical copy of this. I'm really happy I had it and I'm really glad I read it. As you can tell from the title, this is a memoir where Maia goes through your childhood and the process of discovering your identity, both as a genderqueer person who experiments with different pronouns and eventually lands on ear, if I'm remembering that correctly, ear maybe, and also at the same time realizing that E might be asexual and finding communities that embrace ear identity and also embracing it internally and dealing with family struggles. And it does kind of read as a series of stories. This keeps happening to me when I'm reading memoirs written by young people, especially, that you can sort of see when young people have written a bunch of essays about different parts of their life and then get the idea to make a memoir, then sometimes you can sort of see the corners of those essays when they get squished together. And for a graphic novel, then you can sort of see where these started out as comic strips that Maia was writing and then got kind of squished together in the end. So that might be like one of like the criticisms I have. But in general, I really, really did enjoy this memoir. I found it really informative and clear, and I like the art style a lot. I gave it 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. There were some panels that like hit especially hard, some really great quotes. But in general, it's not going to necessarily hit me as hard as some memoirs that I spend like days reading and you really get enveloped in the writer's life. For Maia's memoir, I read it in like an afternoon or two. I think a solid 4 stars is fair there. And then after that, I did take a small break from my physical TBR reading because I needed a book to read while I was in the treadmill sometimes. I'm one of those insane people who reads while they're jogging. And I did finish one of those books this month that I wanted to talk about. I decided to pick up Paladin's Strength by Kingfisher, the sequel to Paladin's Grace and the second book in the Saint of Steel series, which is made of 4 interconnected standalone romance books. I really did not know what to expect from this one because I will say Paladin's Grace, the first book, wasn't my like massively favorite thing on earth. It was good. I felt for Paladin's Grace like it didn't really super connect with me. I was really, really excited that when I started reading Paladin's Strength, it was hitting so much harder. And I think that's just because I personally related to the main female character so much more in Paladin's Strength. I loved her. In this book, we're following Clara and Istvan. And Istvan is a paladin, as all the main characters in this series are. But as opposed to the first book, Istvan is taking this quest to track down a lead, continuing the story from the first book about this creature that is cutting off the heads of people in the town. And when that creature flees the town at the end of the first book, Istvan and one of his other paladins gets charged with following the creature and hunting them down. But in the process, they stumble upon Clara, who is on a bit of a quest of her own and is going in the same direction, and they end up traveling together. And now, like I said, I really, really love Clara because Clara is extremely tall and extremely large and like very built and buff. The physical descriptions of her body felt like the first time like I could really relate to a female-led character in a book, which I really appreciated. And I think T. Kingfisher did such a good job with accurately and neutrally describing her body. Like as someone with that same body, it wasn't like a negative or positive. It was just who she was, which I appreciated and I loved. And I really did like Istvan. I will say though, it's funny that even when you have such a tall, large, imposing female main character, the male main character has to be even taller and even bigger it's kind of like, okay, like fine. But either way, I still really loved them together and I liked their dynamic. So I can just say that I enjoyed this book more than Paladin's Grace, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, a loving 4 stars. It didn't necessarily hit me as hard as some other romance books that I've read have. It can be kind of a tough balance sometimes in a romance book to strike the right level of emotional growth in the characters with their emotional growth to each other and that connection. But I do think the fact that these are romantasy and there is a pretty elaborate fantasy plotline going on in the background means that we can't necessarily dedicate as much time to the emotional sides of these characters as we might want. But it means that I never really got that full emotional release that I prefer out of my romance books. So that would be like my main critique of the Saint of Steel series so far, is just that the balancing for the fantasy and the romance doesn't necessarily work for me. If you want me to get super emotionally invested in the romance, we're gonna need more of it. And if you want me to love these books just for the fantasy plotline, there would need to be more of that too. And it wasn't the right balance for me personally. But that being said, I did really, really love this book. But I'm really excited to continue the series because I think the next book is queer as well. And I'm also very curious where the fantasy plotline will go, because it seems like the main fantasy plotline that I thought would be the plot of all 4 books kind of got resolved at the end of this book. So I'm very curious if there's going to be another plotline that arises in this world, and what that will look like. So I definitely want to get to that at some point soon, hopefully. Then after Paladin's Strength, I went back to my physical TBR and I picked up Stag Dance by Torrey Peters. Stag Dance is a collection of 3 short stories and 1 novella in a book, and the novella is the same as the title of the book, Stag Dance. And then the other 3 short stories are Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, The Masker, and The Chaser. Just off the bat, I really, really liked this collection as a whole, which I'll get to in a second. I kind of have individual reviews for the individual stories because they're all about different things. But I think at the core of all of the stories in this book, which is just a really smart way to do it, by the way, that they all have a similar core. And that core is relationships between members of the trans community and the tensions that can arise. And especially I think in most of these books, the main 3 character archetypes that we see as main characters are a trans woman who struggles to pass, and they maybe feel more isolated from womanhood because of that. There's also the archetype of the trans woman who has a very easy to pass and attracts a lot of sexual attention, sometimes by people who fetishize how easily she passes. And then that 3rd character archetype is this, like, the chaser, like men who are attracted to trans women. And because these character archetypes are repeated in different ways and saying different things about the archetypes in each story, it makes the collection so tight as a whole, because you really learn what Torrey Peters is trying to get at with these characters by the end of the book in such like a strong and cohesive way that I really loved. So overall, I would give this collection 5 stars, which is kind of crazy because my individual ratings are, I gave Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, the first story, 3 stars, The Chaser, 4 stars, Stag Dance, 5 stars, and then The Masker, I gave 4 stars. So with that kind of mixed bag in a short story collection, normally I would just round it around to 4 stars. But in this case, I just feel like even the short stories that were weaker than the novella supported Stag Dance so well, and I don't think I would have given the novella Stag Dance 5 stars if I hadn't read the short stories alongside it, if that makes sense. For Stag Dance in particular, we are following a group of loggers living up in the woods, kind of like in very far from any society over the winter, and in order to like boost the morale of the men, the head of the logging group decides to put on a stag dance, and then some of the men will have to like put on a scrap of cloth, a triangle that demarcates them as like available for like seducing. And our main character is like the tallest, buffest, strongest logger out there, but they decide that they want to be courted for the dance, and they have this sort of competition with one of the very like beautiful men of the loggers who is already kind of being chased by the other men. It's just really, really, really good. And it wouldn't have been as good if I didn't understand sort of the tensions that were already being set up between these 2 characters and the romantic interest that they're seeking in the first 2 short stories of the book. So like those just like because of that, I was enmeshed in Stag Dance from the beginning. You can also clearly tell the order that these stories were written in because they put the dates at the end of the book, and I was like, oh yeah, Torrey Peters, I got you. Where Stag Dance is the most recent story she's written, and I'm like, that's so clear because the writing is just impeccable. It's such a well-written novella. I would tell you to just read Stag Dance, but I genuinely think it's so much more of a story if you read the other short stories that Torrey Peters has put it alongside in this book. I think altogether it presents such a solid whole that I was really, really obsessed, and I'm excited to read more from Torrey Peters. I've been meaning to read Detransition Baby for a long time, so this has just made me even more excited to do so because I really, really loved her writing in Stag Dance. I thought it was incredible. After that, I got sick. I had food poisoning. So I was like, I need something light, I need something easy to read. So I finally picked up the Raven Boys graphic novel for the first Raven Boys book by Maggie Stiefvader and adapted for the graphic novel by Stephanie Williams. I feel like I haven't mentioned that Stephanie Williams adapted the graphic novel before on this channel, so I want to say that. If you know me, you know I love the Raven Boys world of both the Raven Boys, the 4 books of the Raven Boys series and the Dreamer trilogy. For me, Maggie Stiefvader's writing is just this beautiful, mystical, fantastical writing style that like doesn't feel like YA when I'm reading it. Some of the characters in the Raven Boys do feel a little YA, but that's fine. So that being said, I do think the original versions of this story are better. Like, I don't think I would ever tell anyone, oh yeah, you should definitely read the graphic novel and not the book. I think the graphic novel for me was a really good time because I love the original story. So this felt like adding on. Like, it felt like when you read a book and then you go on Pinterest and you scroll through fan art or something like that, or you go on Twitter and scroll through fan art and you're like getting more of these characters and more of interpretations of them. That's what reading this graphic novel felt like. It felt like reading through really great fan interpretations of the characters, but it just doesn't compare to how giddy and exciting the writing in the original feels. So with that being said, I gave the graphic novel 4 stars. I think if you read the graphic novel without reading the original book, it would probably be lower than that because it's just too fast-paced in the graphic novel. There's so much that happens that I kind of forgot. So much of the story happens in this first Raven Boys book, and you have to just absolutely run through it. So much of the beautiful like writing moments, the little bantery moments that make the relationships between the characters so strong are dropped for the graphic novel because there's just not space for it, which I totally don't blame the adapter for. I think it would be impossible to adapt everything perfectly, but it does make the whole weaker than the original, which I can't deny. And I also, to be fair though, I gave the original Raven Boys 4 stars. It's not a perfect book. This graphic novel, more than anything, makes me want to reread the original series and return to these characters in the written word and not visuals, because I think that's where they breathe so much life into the story even more. Not at all insulting. I really had a good time with this graphic novel. I enjoyed it, and if you read the Raven Boys, pick up the graphic novel. It's a fun time. Then you'll get to just look at visual depictions of these characters. Like, my god, I would look at Adam in this graphic novel. He's beautiful. He's my favorite character, so it's also like extra special for me. I'm like, yes, my favorite character. Because of that, I had a good time, but it doesn't stand alone, I don't think, without the original source text. Then, after that, I also finished the audiobook that I was working on throughout the month of November. I had been working on Light Eaters, How the Unseen World of Plant Intelligence Offers a New Understanding of Life on Earth by Zoe Schlanger. This is a nonfiction about a journalist who became super devoted to learning about new plant research and deciding to bring together the findings that she discovered in this book that mainly focuses on the current debate of plant intelligence in the botany and ecology communities. And I think Schlanger did such an amazing job with this off the bat, I want to say, because even though it's a book about plant intelligence and the potential for plants to experience some form of consciousness or intelligence that we may not understand, she's like kind of my stance. That's where I like feel that these plants do have more intelligence. But she also offers that a lot of botanists still don't agree and don't feel the same way, and offers contrary research as well, which I appreciated. But in general, I think she also does a really good job at being very convincing for her point, for offering reasons we consider humans intelligent and showing how science has demonstrated plants exhibiting those exact same behaviors. And it was just an incredible, incredible time. I love this book. I feel like I say this for every single nonfiction I pick up, but like, this is a great nonfiction to pick up even if you don't love nonfiction, you should pick up this book because it was so interesting. And I did give The Light Eaters 5 stars. It's just a nonfiction book that totally changes the way that you see a huge majority of the world. Like right now, I can see like 15 plants just from my view right now, and understanding them as intelligent living beings who feel kinship bonds and can react to external stimuli and can synthesize chemicals on demand and respond to other plants and animals in their surroundings and can respond to sound as well, is just so like mind-boggling and incredible, and like really alters your perception of like the life that we share this planet with. Reading this book and understanding the way that plants communicate makes you realize that even though we can't communicate with plants, doesn't mean that they aren't capable of communication. And that may sound so sci-fi-y, so I'm sorry if I'm explaining this so poorly. This book is not sci-fi-y. It's genuine botany research in the realms of plant intelligence, and also a bit of a history lesson on why a lot of plant intelligence research has been thrown out and underfunded in the past half century or so, that I found incredibly fascinating. If any of that, like even slightly like intrigues you, please pick up this nonfiction book. The audiobook was just incredible. It's on Spotify. And I really loved it, and I highly recommend The Light Eaters by Zoe Schlanger. And then I ended off the month with 2 books that I read on the plane, so I can talk about them pretty quickly because I read them pretty quickly. The first one is a really short graphic novel called The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill, which I didn't even realize it's only like 30-page graphic novel when I picked it up, but it's a very cute 30-page graphic novel, and I downloaded it on my Kindle and I read it on my flight. And I think there's a couple more books in the series or covering related characters that I also want to pick up, maybe for another flight in the future, just because it's so light and fluffy. But it's just about a young girl belonging to a blacksmith's family who runs into a couple that raises tea dragons on the outskirts of her small village, and they start teaching her how to take care of tea dragons as well. I had a good time with it. The art style is also just stunning. That's the thing I remember more than anything. I'm like, what happened in this graphic novel actually? Because I was just staring at the art for every page and loving that. I don't really know what the age group for this is. Maybe it's meant for middle grade. I don't really know, but I think you can enjoy it at any age because I thought it was cute. And I really liked the Tea Dragon Society. And then lastly, I ended the month by continuing my Emily Henry reading journey. I decided to finally pick up Funny Story by Emily Henry for my flight. Read it in like 24 hours. Really loved this book. And just in general, I love Emily Henry. No other author has consistently brought me to tears through her romance books as solidly as Emily Henry has, which I just really appreciate. Funny Story, if you haven't been told a million times by the internet, is a romance between 2 slighted individuals, both of whom were dating a pair of childhood best friends. So our main character, Daphne, was dating Peter, or was engaged to Peter. They were about to be married. And on the eve of Daphne and Peter's wedding, he dumps Daphne for his childhood best friend, thus also breaking up the other couple. It's kind of like a shock dumping, and Daphne was living in Peter's house, and now Miles doesn't have a roommate to help cover rent. So Daphne moves in with Miles. You get the picture. I'm explaining this so poorly, but they're both roommates. They're both like grieving their lost relationships. And in a moment of weakness, Daphne decides to RSVP with a +1 to her ex's wedding to his new fiance, and says that she's actually now dating Miles. And so then she and Miles kind of sort of fake date, or they meet up a couple of times in public. And in those moments, they end up falling in love. Both of them have family struggles. Individually, Emily Henry's great at writing a strong family dynamic that influences these characters' behaviors with each other. There's so many great emotional moments, and in general, I really loved this. I gave Funny Story 4 stars. Now you might be asking, 4 stars? You're saying you loved it. I know that writers can have consistent writing styles, but I just feel like there are a little bit too many similarities between book lovers and Funny Story, and also people we meet on vacation, weirdly. It just feels like all of Emily Henry's characters, who are very well written and strong and 3-dimensional, kind of end up all feeling very similar, at least to me. I think I need a long break before I read another Emily Henry book so I can really disconnect all the characters from each other. And I didn't feel like this in the beginning of the book, because in the beginning of the book, Miles is like described as like a stoner kind of free spirit guy, and they both like kind of become much more like, I don't even know, not bland characters because I still liked them, but just kind of similar characters to other Emily Henry characters that I've read, no offense. So for me, it didn't really feel like super innovative or something new. It emotionally impacted me similar to Book Lovers, but not quite the same, because Book Lovers, I related really strongly to the characters. And Funny Story, I'm like, well, I don't know if I would act exactly as you are, but I guess I do see why you're acting that way, and it is emotional. Funny Story just had to compare to Book Lovers because the similarities between them, because the similarities in Emily Henry's writing style. I was always going to compare these two books, and Book Lovers I just loved so much that Funny Story just falls short in comparison. Like maybe if Funny Story was the first book I read from Emily Henry, it would have been 5 stars. We don't know. We'll never know. Either way, I still really enjoyed it, and I definitely still recommend it. And I think that if you related more to the characters than I did, I think this would easily be a 5-star, because the writing is amazing. Lots of things that I really loved in Funny Story. That is the end of my November wrap up. I ended up talking for longer than I thought. Hopefully I'll just edit it down a lot, because I was talking a lot for those 9 books. I'm really happy with my reading in November. It wasn't like my best reading month. It's okay. That happens sometimes. I'd read, how many physical TBR books on this list? I read 5 physical TBR books. 2 of them are graphic novels. Counts, you know, it's progress. It's good. It's a solid percentage that I can be happy with. But in December, I definitely want to prioritize even more strongly my physical TBR, which we'll get to now. For my reset, I kind of want to pick out, I think, not too many books, because I didn't get to all of both my November TBR and my like end of year TBR that I talked about in the end of year tag video that I've made. I talked about a lot of books that I want to read. All of those books still count. You'll see some of them in this stack, but I don't need to talk about them for another video again. So on top of those books all carrying over, I won't have like the most time on earth. So I think we're gonna keep this like short and sweet. Add a couple of extra books to the stack for December. I'm gonna pick out 2 physical books and 2 Kindle books, because I don't actually have any Kindle books checked out right now, and I know I'm gonna want to read some Kindle books. So I'll pick 2 of both. For physical books, I'm just gonna do the 2 books in this stack that I haven't talked about in other videos, so you can get some new content from me. But I think I'm gonna finally pick up Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I have been really wanting to read this for like multiple years, like 2 years, because my sister read this book and really loved it and recommended it to me. This is not split timeline is not the right word, split perspective between 2 branches of a family, and I might be remembering this incorrectly because this is just what I think my sister told me like 2 years ago. It's about 2 sisters in Africa in what year? 18th century Africa in Ghana, and one of the sisters is sold to slavery, and the other sister marries like a wealthy man in Ghana and stays in Ghana. And I believe each chapter follows another one of their descendants, all going all the way up until the modern day. And I've heard it's incredibly emotional, which I believe because I've actually read Transcendent Kingdom from Yaa Gyasi, which is a beautiful but very emotional book. And I'm just really excited to finally get to this. And I know my sister will be really excited about me finally getting to it. And also it's been a second since I read some American history. I think the last American history I read was over the summer, 1491. I don't really know what to expect, but I'm very excited to get to Homegoing, and I think it's pretty doable, because what I remember about Transcendent Kingdom is that Yaa Gyasi's writing style is very light and really pulls you in, and even when you're like hurt and you'd rather not be reading it, you just like can't stop reading it, so I'm really excited for that. And then continuing the vein of literary fiction, I think I'm also going to pick up my next Jeanette Winterson, because I'm dying for it. I'm really excited to pick up The Passion by Jeanette Winterson. Not a clue what this is about, but I'm sure if I tried to explain it to you, it wouldn't make sense anyways, because that's what I love so much about Jeanette Winterson's writing style. It's so eclectic and interesting. And it's actually been a really long time since I read a fiction book from Jeanette Winterson. I think it was last year I read Sexing the Cherry last. And then this year I have read another book from her, but it was her memoir. So this is gonna be the first fiction book that I've read from Jeanette Winterson in a second, actually, which I'm really looking forward to. It's pretty short. All of her books are very short, but like very dense with confusion. So I'm gonna annotate this and have a really good time, hopefully. I'm really excited to continue my read through of all of Jeanette Winterson's works, and also to get 2 more books down on my physical TBR is my goal for December. I feel like these are good books to add on because they're both shorter, and I kind of fly through literary fiction personally. Fantasy books I can spend like weeks reading. I always read literary fiction pretty fast, so I feel like these are very doable to add to my TBR. For my Kindle TBR, let me scroll through, Because like I said, with Libby's new policy, I have so many books suspended right now for my Libby holds, so we can like scroll through those. Actually, I'm gonna record this. We can scroll through it together. As you can see, I have so many books suspended right now. It's actually kind of overwhelming. I need to check this more often because I've just like been suspending everything and I've kind of forgotten what I have suspended. Oh, I could read the next Kingfisher book, but I wouldn't be finishing that series. Let's prioritize series. If I'm gonna read Kindle books, let's at least get the goal of working on series done. Oh, let me start with saying I'm gonna add a Mouthful of Dust by Nghi to the TBR. A Mouthful of Dust is not finishing a series, but it is continuing an ongoing series. It's the newest book in the Singing Hills cycle. I think it's book 6 in the Singing Hills cycle. The Singing Hills cycle is a series of novellas following a traveling monk, where this monk is responsible for gathering stories, basically, to preserve them. And sometimes the monk also gets pulled into, it's cleric actually, cleric or monk. They also sometimes get pulled into stories themselves where they become the main character. That happened in the last installment. And I've really enjoyed all of these short stories. I just enjoy Nghi's writing style. I think it's very fun and fairy tale-esque. But I did really love the last installment, I remember, so I'm excited to see what A Mouthful of Dust has in store. And I also think the cover for this one's really, really cute. So that'll keep me on track with my series, and it's coming up in 2 weeks approximately, so I should be able to get to it in the later half of December whenever my hold gets through. And then, let me also say, this will be the last book on the TBR, very maybe-y. I'm gonna unsuspend and see if I could give A Curse Carved in Bone by Danielle Jensen another shot. I tried reading this earlier this year. This is the sequel to A Fate Inked in Blood that I read last year. I had a silly, goofy, good time with A Fate Inked in Blood. I enjoyed it. I remember it flying by, and I thought the romance was like fun and dynamic, and I actually cared about the characters. And in general, the other romantasy I've read from Danielle Jensen has really worked for me. Like, I like her writing style and it works. But for some reason I started A Curse Carved in Bone earlier this year and I could not get into it. I think part of the problem is I don't really remember what happened in the first book. I don't feel like rereading A Fate Inked in Blood right now. I really don't. So I might try to just find a summary video for A Fate Inked in Blood to remind myself how that book left off. Because when I started A Curse Carved in Bone, it starts like literally right where it leaves off. And I didn't remember a thing. But if I can get to it, I would really love to, and then I can finish this duology, and that's another series finished for me, which would be great, and I would love. But in general, I think with those 4 books, we have a stacked TBR going in more ways than one. Not only is it a lot of books, but also a lot of really, really anticipated books that should be really good. Even if I may not read like 20 books or anything crazy this month, I'm hoping to read some really, really good books this month. That's my main goal. Always, but especially this month to end the year on a bang. But with that, thank you so much for watching, for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed this reset. Again, sorry for the break in videos. I hopefully will be back on a regular schedule this month. I'm currently working on a bookshop tour of Copenhagen that honestly I've just been dreading editing. So I'm gonna muster up the energy to try to edit that and get it to you because I really, really love the footage I took. I just need to find the energy to put it together. And then we're into end of year content, which is really exciting. I have not been tracking my stats at all this year, so I'm really excited to look back on the year as a whole. I don't think it was as good as 2024, unless this final month brings like some crazy books. I think 2024 still has 2025 beat, but we'll have to see that at the end of December. I'll give it one more month. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I really, really appreciate all of your comments. They're always so sweet and lovely. And of course, I'll see you in my next video pretty soon. Thanks so much. Bye.